Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today, on this auspicious day of Akshaya Tritiya, we'll be continuing with Canto 10, Chapter 8, verse 21. Kalena vrajatalpena Gokule Rama Keshava Janubhyam sahapanibhyam Ringamano vijahratu Kalena of time, Brajata passing, Alpena a very small duration, Gokule in Gokul, Brajadam, Rama Keshava, both Balaram and Kṛṣṇa, Janubhyam, by the strength of their knees, Sahapanibhyam, resting on their hands, Ringamano, crawling, Vijahratu, enjoyed childhood play. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. After a short time passed, both brothers Ram and Kṛṣṇa began to crawl on the ground of Braja with the strength of their hands and knees, and thus enjoy their childhood play. Purport. One Brahmin devotee says, Shrutim apare smritim itare bharatam anye bhajantu bhava bitaha aham iha nandam vande yasyalinde param brahma. Let others fearing material existence worship the Vedas, the Vedic supplementary Puranas, and the Mahabharata, but I shall worship Nanda Mahārāja, in whose courtyard the Supreme Brahman is crawling. For a highly exalted devotee, Kaivalya, merging into the existence of the Supreme, appears no better than hell, narakayate. But here one can simply think of the crawling of Kṛṣṇa and Balaram in the courtyard of Nanda Mahārāja, and always merge in transcendental happiness. As long as one is absorbed in thoughts of Kṛṣṇa Lila, especially Krishna's childhood pastimes, as Parikshit Maharaj desired to be, one is always merged in actual Kaivalya. Therefore, Vyasadeva compiled Srimad Bhagavatam, Lokasya Janato Vidvangs Chakre Sattvata Sanghitam, Bhagavatam 1.7.6. Vyasadeva compiled Srimad Bhagavatam under the instruction of Narada, so that anyone can take advantage of this literature, think of Krishna's pastimes, and always be liberated. Shrutim apare smritim itare bharatam anye bhajantu bhava bitha aham iha nandam vande yasyalinde param brahma. Om ajnanatimmirandasya jnananjana salakaya chakshurunmilitam jena tasmai Shri Gurave namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutle Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavari Paschatya Desha Tarine. So today is Akshaya Tritiya, and this verse, particularly Prabhupada's purport, glorifies Nanda Mahārāja. Now, the childhood pastimes of Kṛṣṇa, this is what the sages were all waiting to hear. At the very beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, the 20th verse, 1:120. We know that within the Bhagavatam there are many different conversations going on. So this conversation between which rishi was it who was inquiring from Sutta? The sages were inquiring from Sutta Gosvāmī, and they presented their desire that they wanted to hear the pastimes of Rama and Keshava, because they had come masked as human beings to enjoy. They used the word kapat. Sonak Rishi, he had asked this question. So at the very beginning, setting the scene of Srimad Bhagavatam, their desire was to hear these childhood pastimes of Rama and Keshava. The first 9 cantos describe the qualities of the Supreme Lord. And finally, in this 10th canto, we're coming to the pastimes of the Lord. And this is what everyone has been waiting for. So Ram and Keshava, now they're in the Komara Lila of their Braja Lila. There are different aspects of the Lila, and the Komara Lila normally goes on from age 1 to age 5. But because Krishna and Balaram were exceptional children, they completed their Komara Lila a little earlier. And their Komara Lila was executed in this particular forest of Braja called Gokul, Mahavan, Brihadvan, on the other side of the Jamuna River, on Balaram's side of the Jamuna. And within these 3 years, Krishna and Balaram, although they were supremely powerful, they were enjoying these infant pastimes, specifically with Mother Yasoda and Nanda Mahārāja. Of all of the recipients of Vatsalya Rasa, there are 7 mentioned. Yasoda Mai, she is superlative. She's number 1. And number 2 is Nanda Mahārāja. And number 3 is Rohini Devi. And number 4 are all of the associated gopis who lived in Gokul with Yashoda and Nanda. And then come Devaki, Vasudeva, Kunti Devi, and Sandipani Muni, who did not get to even have a glimpse of these pastimes in Gokul. So today, being Akshay Tritiya, there's another pastime. Today we're discussing the Komara Lila. Particularly within Komara Lila, there are 3 different sections. There's the Adi Lila, this is the Madhyam Lila, and then there's the end of the Komara Lila, before Krishna and Balaram enter into their Poganda Lila. So today we'll be hearing about the Madhya Lila of this Komara Lila. But because it's Akshay Tritiya, we will hear a little bit about later when Krishna's already in his Kaishura Lila. Krishna and Balaram have migrated with all of the inhabitants of Gokul to the beautiful forest of Vrindavan. And for a few years they stayed just here in Chatikara, while Nanda Mahārāja prepared his Nanda Bhavan in Nandishwar, Nandagaon. So finally, when the palace was ready, they moved to Nandagaon. And at that time, Nanda Mahārāja also he excavated a large lake, which was called at that time Nanda Sarovara. And he and all of the Brijbasis used to take their bath in that lake and draw water. That's also where Radharani used to have her well for cooking for Krishna. So Nanda Mahārāja, he would bathe there every day. Krishna would bathe, Yashoda would bathe. Sometimes Vrishabhanu and his family would come from Barsana. On one side would be Krishna, on one side would be Radharani. Underneath the water they would meet and have their pastimes. But one day, Krishna, he noticed that his mother was cooking something a little different than usual. She was making matri, she was making chudi noodles, She was making all dried things that are fried, that last for a long time. And he asked Yashoda, why are you cooking like this today? Not the usual rice, dal, chapati, sabji, so many sweets. And she explained that Nanda Mahārāja, tomorrow is Akshaya Tritiya. And Akshaya Tritiya is a very good day for beginning journeys. So Nanda Mahārāja, he wants to go on Tirtha Yatra to Prayag. So then Kṛṣṇa, he went to Nanda Mahārāja, asked him, Baba, you going somewhere? Yes, I'm going to Prayag. Where is Prayag? What is Prayag? Well, that's where the three rivers meet, the Triveni. I'm going to, because this is Akshaya Tritiya tomorrow, I'm going to start my journey, and I'm going to get purified there by taking bath in the Triveni. So this pastime, Kṛṣṇa did not want his father to leave Braj, because Yashoda and Nanda Mahārāja, this was the enjoyment that Kṛṣṇa was having. This cuddling, this affection, all of the different exchanges of love between the mother and the father and the child. So he made a plan. The next morning, very early before Kṛṣṇa even woke up, Nanda Mahārāja, he went to Nanda Sarovara to take his bath. And there he saw a very respectable, king-like person rolling in the Braj, laughing, and then bathing in the Sarovara, coming out, rolling again, bathing again. So Nanda Mahārāja had never seen this person before in Braj. He being the king of Braj, he went to the respectable person. He asked, Mahārāja, who are you? He said, I am Prayag. Oh, I've never seen you before. I don't know anyone named Prayag in Braj. I am Prayagraj. I've come from Prayag. Why have you come here? He said, today is Akshaya Tritiya. On Akshaya Tritiya, I come here to get purified, because all year the people are bathing in my waters and throwing off their sins. So on this one day of the year, this Akshaya Tritiya, where the amount of auspiciousness is never reduced, I come and I bathe here in this Sarovara, and I roll in the dust of Braj to get purified. So Nanda Mahārāja, he noticed that on the other side of the river, there were beautiful celestial women bathing. So he went there, he offered his respects, he asked who they were, and they introduced themselves. I'm Ganga, I'm Godavari, I'm Brahmaputra, all the different rivers, the holy rivers. And they also had come here on that day of Akshaya Patriya to purify themselves. Then Nanda Mahārāja, being very satisfied, he returned to his home, and little Kṛṣṇa asked him, Baba, you going today? He said, no, I'm not going anywhere, because Prayagraj himself has come here, so why I have to go there? So this was Kṛṣṇa's arrangement, because he could not bear the separation of his father. He made all this arrangement, and from that day onwards, the Nanda Sarovara was called Pavan Sarovara, because all of the holy places come there on this auspicious day to get purified. Akshaya Tritiya has many different auspicious activities. In the Skanda Purana, it's described that Purushadev Sri Jagannath Ji instructed Indradumna Mahārāja on this day, because it's hot in this season. So there's a Sarovara, Narendra Sarovara. The Utsav Vigrahas of Govinda, Madan Mohan, and Gopinath are taken there for a boat festival. And beginning from this day of Akshaya Tritiya, they're anointed with chandan so that they can be cool. And after that, every day for 21 days, they have this Chandan Yatra festival with the boat festival and the anointing of chandan. Also at the place where Prahlad Maharaj was saved, when the demons threw him off of the cliff at a place called Singachalam, and Lord Kṛṣṇa saved him. there's a beautiful deity there, a combination of Nrsimhadev and Varaha. But he's so angry at the demons that once when Pururava and his wife Urvasi were traveling in their celestial airplane, Pururava was told by Nrsimhadev to come to this place, excavate me, and make a temple. And every day of the year, because he's so hot with anger, I should be covered with chandan. If you go to that temple, the deity looks like a Shiva lingam, round, just like that. As much earth as Pururava took out of the ground to excavate the deity, that much chandan he put on the deity. And only one day in the year, this Akshaya Tritiya, the chandan is removed and you can have the darshan of the beautiful murti of Nrsimha Varahadev. That's in the daytime. And then in the evening, again, he's fully covered for the rest of the year. This is also the day when Treta Yuga began. This is the day when Ganga Devi descended to this planet as the Ganga River. This is the day of the Sixth Incarnation, his appearance of Parshuram. And it's recommended, because of the auspiciousness of this day, that anytime you want to start something new, you do it on this day. If you want to engage in a sanskara, shrad, open a business, the first entrance into the house, the griha pravesh, anything that you want auspiciousness for that will never diminish, you perform on this particular day. So particularly, what's recommended on this day is hearing and chanting about the pastimes of the Lord, and not just any pastimes, but these childhood pastimes of the Lord. So here we are in the middle of the Kumar Lila. Kṛṣṇa has just passed through his first few months of infancy, the Adi Lila of Kumar Lila. And at this time, he's decorated by Mother Yasoda. He has tiger claws on a string around his neck. He has a string around his waist. His mother every day anoints him with Gorochana tilak. Gorochana, it's a bright yellow substance that is within the stomach of a bull. And when that's taken out, it has healing propensities. So Mother Yasoda would make sure to anoint her son with that Gorochana tilak every day. She would tie on his arm an amulet, just with a string, because babies' bodies are very soft, nothing heavy. And within that amulet, she would tie roots for magical powers and herbs for healing powers to protect her son. And in this early stage, before Kṛṣṇa and Balaram were crawling, the baby can only lie on its back, kick its feet, sometimes cry, sometimes laugh. They're very gentle, they're very submissive, they're very respectful. And Mother Yasoda, she would do everything possible to protect her child. When he would be drinking milk, though there was sufficient milk on one side of Mother Yasoda, he would hold on to the other side to make sure that he had enough. And Mother Yasoda, just to see whether his teeth were coming in, she would play with his chin, he would laugh and smile, and she would see the little milk teeth, whiter than milk, coming up from the gums. They hadn't appeared yet. The child's teeth comes at about the 6th or 7th month, and that's when the anaprashan is performed, that's sanskara. Because before you have teeth, you can't eat any grains. So as soon as the teeth come up, then they do the anaprashan sanskara. Then she would blow on the baby's face, on Krishna's face. When you blow on the baby's face, they flutter their eyes. So he would enjoy that, she would enjoy that. Sometimes she would, as if spitting on the baby, just to drive away any inauspiciousness of the baby. There's so many things that a mother does in her loving affection for the baby, and Mother Yasoda was always absorbed in those activities. So this first few months of infancy, Kṛṣṇa was thoroughly absorbed in the loving affection of his mother. And Balaram also with Rohini, together they would enjoy the love of their mothers. Now we're coming to this middle section. At the end of the Adi Lila of Komara, Kṛṣṇa's legs become strong enough that he can turn himself over. That was in the 3rd month. We heard about that. And then he starts to creep. In the next verse, we'll hear about Kṛṣṇa's creeping. Creeping means the legs aren't strong enough yet to crawl. They're not using their knees yet. So with their arms, they pull their body, just like snakes moving. So they started first with creeping, and then as the knees got stronger, then they were able to crawl. And usually, when a baby starts to crawl, he first crawls backwards, because the hands are still stronger. But gradually, Kṛṣṇa and Balaram, they didn't just crawl a little bit, they crawled a lot, all over the courtyard. Because we remember that after Trinavarta was killed by Kṛṣṇa, Nanda Mahārāja instructed Yashoda and Rohini that don't let the children out of the courtyard of the house. There are too many inauspicious things happening. So Kṛṣṇa and Balaram at that time, they were crawling just in the courtyard. And the courtyard, because the cows were also there, there was cow dung, there was cow urine, there was mud. So just after bathing the babies even, with their crawling, they would immediately become dirty again. They were most of the time without any cloth. Sometimes Mother Yasoda would wrap Kṛṣṇa in a little cloth. And you'll notice that there's a particular sampradaya from the Rudra Sampradaya, one Acharya who appeared at about the same time as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Ballabha Acharya. Now, this particular line, they worship Kṛṣṇa in this form when he's just crawling. And that's the deity that we see, the Laddu Gopal, the Makkan Chor. In one hand, he'll have some makkan. And on the other hand, he has like a loda underneath his hand. You'll see a little ball. So at this age, Kṛṣṇa, he was very interested in eating butter. He didn't always have the butter in his hand. He would crawl, and then, because the stealing propensity is there even in a little child, he would look on both sides. Mother Yasoda would be watching him from a distance to make sure Mother Yasoda wasn't seeing him, and then he would take the butter out of the pot. And as he and Balaram became more expert at this, then they learned how to really steal. As they started to walk, Nanda Mahārāja, of course Nanda Mahārāja, he was busy all day with the cows. And sometimes Yashoda would say to Kṛṣṇa and Balaram, when Nanda Mahārāja would come home in the evening, they would ask Kṛṣṇa, is he a part of our family? Because he wouldn't be there all day. Only in the evening time, Kṛṣṇa and Balaram would see him. So after this crawling time, Kṛṣṇa and Balaram, they wanted to walk. They would hold on to things. And when they saw Nanda Mahārāja, sometimes Kṛṣṇa would grab his finger and try to walk. And Nanda Mahārāja, as he's holding Kṛṣṇa, as he's trying to walk, the tears would flow from his eyes. Now, there are particular physical manifestations in those in Vatsalya Ras. They're called anubhavs, and they're different from any other ras. Because in Vatsalya Ras, the servant, they think themselves inferior to Kṛṣṇa, and they serve Kṛṣṇa because he's great. The sakas, they see Kṛṣṇa equally. But those in Vatsalya Ras, they see Kṛṣṇa as inferior to them, and from this Vatsalya Ras, the cause of the Vatsalya Ras, come two specific effects, and that is anugraha and kripa. Anugraha means they want to protect the child because they consider the child helpless, and without their protection, the child might die. And kripa means if there's any form of suffering that they see in the child, they immediately want to relieve that suffering. So the cause is the vatsalya ras, and the effects are these two major qualities. And from these two qualities come different anubhavs. The first is the sva-gṛhaṁ. That means the smelling of the head of the child. A small child who hasn't yet eaten grains, they've only been drinking the milk of their mother or the milk of the cow, they smell just like sweet butter. So the mother and the father and those in vatsalya ras, they would take great pleasure in smelling the head of the child. So sweet, just like butter. And they would also angamardana. They took great pleasure in massaging the body of the Lord, sometimes putting oil on him, sometimes bathing him. Then they would give him ashirvad. They would give the small baby blessings. And they would give him nirdesh. They would give him instructions. They would tell Kṛṣṇa, go get that plank for me. Go get those shoes for me. These different instructions, Kṛṣṇa was learning how to speak then. So he would try to follow out those instructions, even if he couldn't carry them out, because his mother asked him to do something, he would do it. Then there's lalana. Lalana means to take care of the baby, the bathing, the feeding. And there's palana. That's the protection of the baby. And then after that, there's hitopadesh. Hitopadesh means they would try to give him good instructions. Because as Kṛṣṇa grew older, some major propensities were manifested in him. And one of his most prominent propensities was his stealing desire. He would go from house to house, and he was the leader of the gang of his friends, because later, as Kṛṣṇa began to walk, the nearby children, his age and a little older, they would come to play with him. And as Kṛṣṇa walked more and more and he entered into the final stage of Kumara Lila, where they would go was to the neighboring houses to steal. And they didn't only steal, they would harass the gopis, even at such a young age. Sometimes Kṛṣṇa would pull their braids, sometimes he would pull their saris, sometimes he would propose marriage to them. So each day, the gopis would come and report to Mother Yasoda what type of mischief Kṛṣṇa did that day. And it wasn't a complaint. It was just so Mother Yasoda would give Kṛṣṇa this hitopadesh, these good moral instructions, because they would warn her, look at the stealing he's doing now. Look at the mischief he's doing with the girls now. What's going to happen when he grows up? You have to train him now. So in love they were saying this, but Mother Yasoda took this very seriously, actually. And Kṛṣṇa, when he was hearing these complaints, one day he went into someone's house and he stole the butter off of out of the pot, and the little baby was lying there. He took some of the butter and put it on the baby's mouth and then ran out with the butter. So the mother saw all of this. And Mother Yasoda, she would see Kṛṣṇa stealing also. She would have, if you go to Nanda Bhavan in Gokul now, there's the Chaurasi Kambh Bhavan of Nanda Bhavan. They say that that's the original Bhavan. So there were columns in Nanda Mahārāja's house, and those columns were jeweled. And Kṛṣṇa would see the reflection of himself in the jeweled columns. And he would think, when he would see his own reflection, that that was another child. So he would talk to that child. He would say, here, I have some butter, you take some, but don't tell Mother Yasoda. Don't tell her, I'll get in trouble. And Mother Yasoda would watch this. So the mother was always watching, and these different aspects of Anubhav would manifest in her. But after the Anubhav comes these Sattvic bhavs. Now these Sattvic bhavs are the same in all of the rasas, but these are destructive to the Anubhavs. For instance, Mother Yasoda would want to see her child, but because of the tears in her eyes, that's one of the Sattvic bhavs, she couldn't see him clearly. Mother Yasoda wanted to talk to Kṛṣṇa, but because her voice was choked up, she couldn't speak. Mother Yasoda would want to massage the child, but because she was stunned and paralyzed, she couldn't move. So there was a conflict, a competition between the different bhavas in Mother Yasoda in this childhood age. Aside from that, Kṛṣṇa, when he got older and he was playing with the boys, this was when the Vatsalya Ras, although it's prominent throughout the Kumara Lila, these Sakya Ras entered in, because as Kṛṣṇa was able to walk, then the boys can play with him. So it's described just like we have in modern times. We have 24 hours, and each hour is composed of 60 minutes. But the time was measured differently at that time. There were 60 dandas, and each danda had 24 minutes. So the cowherd boys, by this third stage of Kumara Lila, because they loved to play with Kṛṣṇa Balaram so much, the cowherd boys would spend 40 dandas with Kṛṣṇa and Balaram. And the other 20 dandas that they weren't with Kṛṣṇa Balaram, because Kṛṣṇa and Balaram would go home to their mothers, they would just be dreaming of Kṛṣṇa Balaram and how they were playing with him. So gradually Sakya Ras became more and more prominent in Kṛṣṇa's pastimes in this third stage of Kumara Lila. And it was at that time when Kṛṣṇa and Balaram began to herd the calves. Now the cows go out with the men, and the calves stay home. But Kṛṣṇa and Balaram, they like to pretend to be like the cowherd men, so they would pretend that the calves were cows, and they would want to herd them. They would even, because there are always goats, goats also have some special quality of their milk if one is sick. So they would milk the goats, pretending to be like the cowherd men milking the cows. And when they got old enough, they would take the calves out to herd, just like they saw their fathers doing. And Nanda Mahārāja, sometimes in the evening, when he had already come back, he would climb up to the top of his house on the Chandra, the pavilion. There's a little room on the house where Nanda Mahārāja would go, where you can get a view of everything around you. And he would look to see if Kṛṣṇa and Balaram were coming back. And he would call Mother Yasoda that, look, there's your son. I see, because he has a peacock feather. And Kṛṣṇa would have with him a stick, he would have a flute, he would have a buffalo horn. Sometimes they would take leaves and roll the leaves and make those into flutes. So the third stage of Kumara Lila is when Kṛṣṇa begins to play with his friends, and Mother Yasoda and Nanda Mahārāja are enjoying his freedom now to go out of the house and play with the other children. So I don't know what the time is. There's no clock here today? There. Okay, we have more time then. So later we'll read about when Kṛṣṇa, in this infancy time, when he was still very attached to his mother, when he showed his mother the universal form for the second time after he'd eaten dirt, and Mother Yasoda began to ponder as if she was illusioned, that how am I seeing this within the belly of my son, because you open the mouth and the whole universe was in his belly. She was thinking that, well, I know that I'm awake, so I'm not dreaming. I know that I'm not crazy because I can do all my activities normally. And I know that this child, because of what Garga Muni said, is special, just like Narayan. But I also know that this child is completely dependent upon me. When he doesn't see me, he becomes disturbed. And when I don't see him, I become disturbed. If he doesn't have my milk, he cries. So I know that he can't be the Supreme Lord because he's so dependent upon me. So therefore, these things that I'm seeing in his mouth are simply the effects of the worship of Narayan by my good husband, Nanda Mahārāja, and myself. By worshiping Narayan, he has given us such a special child. So Kṛṣṇa, when he showed that universal form, and he saw that Mother Yasoda was becoming bewildered, he began to think, if Mother Yasoda thinks that I'm something special, then who's going to cuddle me anymore? So then he put the Yoga Maya influence over Mother Yasoda, so that she would forget everything that she had seen and just pick him up again as a little child. So in this Gokul Lila, when the Komar Lila is going from stage to stage, the Vatsalya Ras is most prominent. But then after Kṛṣṇa pulled down the two Yamal Arjuna trees, Upananda, he called a meeting, and he decided that all of these inauspicious things that are happening to Kṛṣṇa here in Gokula, we have to protect our child. And Kṛṣṇa, when he saw that Upananda was speaking, he came and sat in his lap. And Upananda, he was speaking to Nanda Mahārāja, all of the other cowherd men. He said, we should immediately leave this place and go somewhere where these inauspicious elements are not taking place. Now, the cowherd family, the community, had been living there for many years, since Parjanya Mahārāja's time. They had their houses, they had their roads, they had their goshalas. Everything was very set up very nicely in the community. But as soon as Upananda, who was the most wise and the most elderly of all the cowherd men, said that we should leave this place immediately, in one day, they gave up everything in order to protect their child Kṛṣṇa. They packed up everything into their bullock carts, and they left for Vrindavan. Nanda Mahārāja suggested that they go to Vrindavan because there's water there, there's green grass, there are caves. All of these things are required for taking care of the cows, and their primary interest was the cows. Wherever there's water and green grass, that's where they want to take the cows. So in one day, they gave up everything. And Kṛṣṇa and Balaram, while still in this Komara age, they traveled with Mother Yasoda and Rohini and entered into the beautiful Vrindavan forest, where they began their Poganda Lila, their childhood Lila, where the prominence is the Sakyaras. Because the Sakyaras, we know from Prahlad Maharaj that there are 9 major aspects of bhakti. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Bandhanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, and Atmanivedanam. So Sakyam and Atmanivedanam, they're very rare to attain. Actually, they're difficult to attain. Because in the Dasya Ras, which comes before that, we understand the greatness of the Lord. But in the Sakya Ras, when we see the Lord equally, and the boys, when they're playing with Kṛṣṇa, they say, you're the same as us. You're no different. I'll just climb on your shoulders. And the Sakya Ras is so special that even the gopis would glorify the cowherd boys. When they're singing the Venu Geet, they sing about how Kṛṣṇa, Balaram, and all the cowherd boys, all their activities during the day. And Lord Brahma, he would also glorify the Sakhas with Kṛṣṇa. So this Satya Ras is very elevated. And then above that is Atma Nivedana. So Atma Nivedana is when you give your entire self to the Lord. And this is exactly what Mother Yasoda will be glorified for by Śukadeva Gosvāmī to Parikshit Maharaj. How Mother Yasoda knew nothing but the care and the love for her own child. So this Atma Nivedana is manifest in the rasas of Vatsalya Ras and Madhura Ras. Now in Vatsalya Ras, the rasas are like tastes. And we know that, for instance, if you have milk, if you mix milk with sugar, it becomes sweeter, it becomes more tasty. But if you mix milk with salt, it becomes like poison. So just like the mixing of different tastes, some are sweeter and some are dangerous, like friends and enemies. So this Vatsalya Ras has particular friends in the different rasas and also enemies. So the friends of Vatsalya Ras, the Vatsalya Ras is called the Angi, and the other rasas that help to make the Vatsalya Ras sweeter are called the Angas. So when you mix Vatsalya Ras with Hasya Ras, it becomes sweeter. And that's when Mother Yasoda would watch Kṛṣṇa trying to steal the butter, thinking that she couldn't see him. Then she would laugh. Then if you mix Vatsalya Ras with Karuna Ras, that's compassion, that's also friendly. Because Mother Yasoda, when she would see Kṛṣṇa going out to herd the calves, she would think to herself, this little child, he doesn't have any shoes, he doesn't have an umbrella, he'll be suffering all day, and there's nothing I can do because he just wants to play with the boys. So this Karuna Ras is also friendly to Vatsalya Ras. And then also Bhayanak Ras. Bhayanak Ras means when the mother, the father, they're always worrying what's going to happen to Kṛṣṇa. And if any enemies come, they're so afraid. But there are other rasas that don't at all mix with Vatsalya Ras, particularly Dasya Ras. That doesn't mix with Vatsalya Ras, because in Vatsalya Ras you consider yourself greater than Kṛṣṇa. Dasya Ras, you're considered subservient to Kṛṣṇa. So that doesn't mix. The Raudra Ras. Now sometimes Mother Yasoda, she would get angry at Kṛṣṇa, but only as a show. Never really angry, simply to give him some upadesh. And then the Yudhavira Ras, that doesn't mix. Never is there fighting between the Mother Yasoda and Kṛṣṇa. She might enjoy Kṛṣṇa's fighting with his cowherd boyfriends, enjoy watching that, but she personally would never fight. So these rasas do not mix with Vatsalya Ras. So therefore, when we see these pastimes of Mother Yasoda and Nanda Mahārāja and the gopis, now they're different age gopis. The younger gopis, when Kṛṣṇa was a little baby, even in the first and second stage, the younger gopis, in order to, if he started to cry, they would pick him up and they would play games with him. They would touch their forehead to his forehead, their eye to his eye, their chest to his chest, and then they would embrace him. Now we have to remember, just like in the Leela of Putana, although Kṛṣṇa is enjoying in a little baby body, he's still the all-powerful Sadaishvarya Supreme Lord within that baby's body. So when these gopis would be embracing Kṛṣṇa, he was enjoying that embrace just as if he were in the Kaishura Leela, and he wouldn't want to let go of them. And then the older gopis, who themselves might have had children, they loved Kṛṣṇa just like their own son. So when Balaram wasn't there that day, and Kṛṣṇa was enjoying on equal level with his friends, because when Balaram would be playing with them, he would have to treat Balaram, serve him his meal like that when they would sit down to lunch. But that day they were enjoying equally. He was taking from everybody's plate. And when he became the calves, the calves, and the cowherd boys, at that time, these elderly gopis who had this Vatsalya ras, he was able to completely fulfill their desire to treat him just like their own son. So Kṛṣṇa has many, many different ways that he wants to satisfy his devotees. When Drona and Dara were in the heavenly planets and they were ordered by Lord Brahma to come to Gokul and take birth, and they prayed that let these pastimes be so attractive that just by hearing the childhood pastimes, one can become free from all material miseries. So this is what we're experiencing now. Just to satisfy the benediction given by Lord Brahma, Kṛṣṇa became the son of Yashoda and Nanda Mahārāja, so that all of these childhood pastimes that we're hearing can immerse us in the ocean of bliss, of never again wanting to return to the material world because of absorption in Krishna's pastimes. So on this Akshaya Tritiya, we should absorb ourselves mostly in Krishna's pastimes by hearing and chanting. It's very good on this day also that if we've taken our vows of Diksha, if there's been any leniency in our vows, then we again recommit ourselves. We should chant with great attention. We should very carefully follow the 4 regulative principles, only associate with the devotees, because this is the day that will enrich any vow, any aspiration that we have. So with that, we'll ask if there are any questions. There's 1 or 2 minutes left.